What's up guys, welcome to the software engineering channel. In today's video I'm going to be talking about C#9 new features. Everything I've learned looking into C#9 new features is what I'm going to be discussing today, and it's on the .NET series. It's just a couple of videos that I'm going to be making about the new things I'm learning, or new things I've discovered about C# and .NET. Let's dive right in, guys. So C#9 came out at about May 2020, and I'm just getting into it. I'm just really having that time to look into it, and everything I've learned is what I'm going to be discussing today. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is the init only property. We'll see what that means and how it works, how it differs from what we already have. We're also going to be looking at records. In my opinion, record is the major advancement that was made in C#9, in my opinion. We're going to be looking at different ways to creating records. We're going to be looking at the concept of immutability in records. We're going to be looking at non-destructive mutation. These guys have big names for saying very small things, so don't be intimidated. That's just another way to say cloning in records. We're going to be looking at inheritance, and that's all about records. We're also going to be looking at top level statements. This for me is where clean code actually sets in C#9. We'll see how it works. And we're also going to be looking at new. I can't figure out any name for it, but it's just it's a new way, literally a new way to initialize objects in C#. Let's dive right into code, guys. Okay, so I have code sample here that is going to be describing the init only feature. This is a simple console application that runs on .NET 5.0, although at some point we are going to be changing it to 6.0 because some of these features are only able to work on .NET 6.0, but when we get to that bridge, we'll cross it. So the first one being init only property. So init only property is basically introduced when we want to make a particular property in a class read only. So up until now, let's say for example we have Crafts Inc. staff. Let's say we have, let me bump this up a little so you can see it. So let's say we have Crafts Inc. staff. So Crafts Inc. is an organization, and we're trying to create a model around the staff. So we want to build one application, maybe staff career portal or whatever it is. We have different properties. We have the first name, we have the last name, we have the staff code, and we have a customized toString method just to format some presentation. So this is just our normal POCO class that we are used to. What I did here was to instantiate a new staff, first name, last name, set the staff code, and we are trying to use our toString, which is method that we have formatted over here. So let's run this just to be sure that this works. Okay, so you can see what we have. We have I am John Doe with code JD blah 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 blah. So that works. Obviously that works. So now let's say for example we have a new use case, and we're told your boss gave you a new requirement, and the requirement is we don't want our system to present an introduction for our staff without adding the company name. Right, so that means your boss wants the company name to always be presented each time the introduction is mentioned. And you know that company name obviously is Crafts Inc. It should not change. That means the staff should not have the ability to change their company name, right? But with this implementation, we might be unable to do that. So let's add company name here. So let's say I work at 3, and 3 is going to be company name. Let's have this initialized. So let's do something like this rather than that. So we can do something like this to say first name equals dummy, last name equals to dummy, and staff code equals to Craft Inc. blah blah blah, and the company name is equal to Craft Inc. So this works, right? And if we run our code, run our program, what we would usually have. So my name is Dami. Let's go this, and I work at Craft Inc. Right? That works. So I mean, the question now becomes, what is the actual essence of init only property? So this is where the problem of this implementation lie. So I can always come here to change my last name. Let's say, for example, I had a change of name and say my last name is now Stone, right? But notice that the requirement says the company name should not be changed, right? Should not be changed. And I mean, you can always do something like this. You can always do something like this. Let's change it to so I mean, so the company name is changed, right? And there are different ways to actually solve this problem. All right. You can use the setters. So a way to solve this problem might be to put some form of logic on your setter, which I mean defeats the essence of your domain objects. There shouldn't be any logic within your domain object, right? And another way you might want to do it is to probably turn company name into read-only and all of those stuff. But I mean, all of that stuff is not necessary, and this is where init actually comes in. So once you add that init property here, you would only be able to initialize company name. Immediately you would notice that we are unable to do this. So that means you can only initialize company name, but you cannot reassign a value to it. And that's where init only property shines. So this doesn't work. And for me, I love this feature. Actually, it solves a lot of problem, and it's going to make your code base much smooth. So we can run our application to be sure it works. And yeah, we have the same results. So now let's go into the next one, which is records. Records for me is actually the main stuff. A record is basically a glorified class, actually. Yeah, it's a class that has extra features decorated on it. So most of the time you have objects, and objects are mutable. Objects are mutable. It means objects can be changed within the course of your program execution, which is basically the reason why objects are very great data types. But there are times whereby you want your objects to be immutable, and you want your objects to act like value types, not reference types. This is where you actually use records. So let's see how to actually turn this class into a record. So the first thing to do actually is to introduce the record keywords, and there are actually two ways to turn this class into a record. So you can either change class into a record, which is the first way. So I'm going to show you the second way, but let's deal with the first way first. So you change this class into a record. If you leave it this way, right, this defeats the purpose of a record being immutable, because you still have your setters here. So that means for all of these setters, you want to change them into init as the second thing to do. Change them into init. And this is how to create a record. Once this is done, your record is created. As I said, your record is basically another class. So you can basically do everything you can do with a class. So let's go to, and another cool thing about record is remember that we had to do this with class. But what I found out is you don't need to do this with records. Records have their own implementation of toString. We are going to see it. We're going to see how that works. So let's initialize our record. I'm going to comment this out. Should you check the code base? So let's have accounts. Let's say new accounts. And of course, the question would be, why do I want to make account immutable? I mean, this is just an example, right? There are other use cases that perfectly fit. It all depends on your requirements. So if your requirements is such that you need an object that is immutable, then you should use record. Yeah, but this is just an example to show you how record really works. We're able to initialize our record. 1 account number 2 4 5 6 blah, 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 blah. And we have accounts type, savings, and we have balance. So if you do new account to string, let's run that. So this is what I'm talking about here. So you see that we didn't have to do this with records, but we had to do some form of string formatting with objects. But record has this way of printing out all of your properties within. So yeah, it's beautiful. Basically, this is where the immutability comes in. You can't say balance is equal to, again, which I said this is not a good use case for it, because I mean your account would always change. But I mean it's an example. It's an example to show you how it really works. That is the immutable concept of records, which should fit your use case. Basically, you should know, it's your duty to understand your requirements and know where to fit record in, to know where record actually fits. I'm yet to use it personally, but I'm sure it's going to come up sometime in the future. So this is the first way to initialize a record, to create a record. And you can also create a record using a one-liner. So public, you can say public record accounts v2, and you have int id string account number string account type decimal balance. This is another way to create a record, because this is like your one-liner way of creating a record. Put this down so you can see. While this is more like your POCO pattern of creating a record, but the initialization is quite different. So if we want to initialize the v2, accounts v2, what we can do is to say accounts v2 equals new accounts v2. So for this particular pattern, you can't do something like this. This would not work, right? This is not going to work. So you can see that this, so what it expects is for you to actually populate the what's it called, properties into the accounts directly. So should have something like 1. So you have something like 1, and you have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have savings, and you have that. So this is how this works, and pretty much the same way you can have new accounts. You can have accounts v2 dot to string. That yeah. So the initialization pattern is quite different. You choose the one that works for you, and yeah, basically that's the second way to initialize a record. Now another thing that we are going to be looking at is the equality of records. Now for objects, when you're trying to check equality for objects is based on the reference. It's based on reference, right? So it doesn't really check for internal properties. It doesn't act like a value, like you're checking for values. It is based on if this is actually equals to this. That's in terms of reference. But for records, that is not the case. Record actually checks equality based on the values. So let's do an example. So let's comment this out. Let's comment this out actually. So I'm going to create another v2 account with different name but the same value. Accounts. So I'll call this new accounts. Now you can see that they have the same value, right? So let's check for the equality of these two. New accounts v2 to string. I'm going to print them out. Then let's check for the equality. So let's say account v2 is equal to new accounts v2. Now you can see that we have true here, right? So the reference is obviously not the same, but because the values are the same, the equality matches, and that's the difference between object equality and records equality. Records equality is actually based on the value, not the reference. So another thing we are going to look at is non-destructive mutation, which I said is another name for cloning, and this is done using the with keyword. This is done using the with keyword. So it can also be called with expression. That's called with expression as well. Non-destructive mutation. So if I want to create another account of accounts v2, right? Because I cannot mutate accounts v2, what I can do is I can say account v3 equals to account v2 with because let's say all that I'm changing is just the account type, so I can say with account type equals current, and let's say I'm changing the balance as well, and balance equals 250,000. So this is what is actually called non-destructive mutation. So we are actually mutating account v2, but we are not destroying it. We are not obviously it is immutable, right? But if you want to create a clone of account v2, we're just changing few things. The with expression comes handy, and that's how it's done. So we can do a console.log on account v3 to string, and let's check that out. So now you see the fun stuff about this. This doesn't say account v3, right? It says account v2. That's to tell you that what we actually did is a clone of account v2. So that means account v3 is actually a type of account v2. So although we are cloning account v2, but we are not destroying its reference, right? So we are not destroying its reference. So you can see that we changed this. So we mutated account v2, but account v2 remains immutable. I know all of this does not make sense to you, but you get what I mean, right? We cloned account v2, but account v2 is immutable. So account v3 is carrying a type of account v2. Yeah, I love stuff, but I mean that's how it works. So it's a fun stuff actually. When you find the correct use case for it, I'm sure it's going to come in very handy to work with. Hence the name non-destructive mutation. You are mutating a record, but you are not destroying it at the same time. Okay, so let's see how inheritance also works in records. Inheritance works the same way it has always worked in classes. What that means is we can do something like this. So let's say we want to have an account called flex account. So flex accounts can inherit from accounts. That's what I'm talking about. And you can add its own property to say star number, and so this is the way inheritance work. But what you should note is a record cannot inherit a class. That's going to cause problems. So you can see this already is causing a problem. So a record cannot inherit a class. A class can inherit from classes. Records can also inherit from records, and it works all the same way. So that's everything we're going to be considering about records. So the next feature we are going to be looking at is the top level statements. So let's use this actually. Let's use this to describe that. So normally a file can contain more than one namespace. I can have another namespace seated here. I can have another namespace seated here. Features.com. All right. So this is possible, right? And I think that is why C#, the team over C# actually created these boundaries for namespaces. But come to think about it, I think they figured that most people do not actually have more than one namespace in a particular file. So they quickly figured that having these boundaries is more like a waste of time, All right, so instead of that, let's remove the boundaries and let's have top level statements. So we can now do something like this. We can remove these braces and we can have something like this. Now note that this does not work. This is not working because we are currently on .NET 5. Hence the reason why I said some of these features are available on .NET 6. So in order to get this to work, we have to change our TF target framework to .NET 6, save, and that should work perfectly. And that perfectly works. All right, so this is fun stuff as well. Instead of having all of those breezes smelling all around, we can have this and check your code. Everything should build and run perfectly. Yeah, so that is top level statements, and that actually works on .NET 5. You don't need to be on .NET 6 to get this working. Is the new keyword. So previously, when you want to instantiate objects, let's use this as an example. You previously would have to repeat this, right, which is the type of the object. But I mean, C# quickly discovered that once that is done here, we don't need to do this here. So you can actually just remove this and have your new keyword alone, and that works. And that works pretty much for all of the things we've been doing. Actually, you don't need to repeat the type of the object again. With the new keyword, that should work. And that's going to be the end of this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to this channel for more content like this around technologies, .NET, JavaScript, web development, and very soon I'm actually going to be going into blockchain. Yeah, I'm going to be creating some tutorials on Solidity. I've been interested in blockchain, web 3.0 thinking. I mean, it's just curiosity anyways, but you're going to be seeing those updates on this channel. See you on the next one, guys. Bye bye.